Okay, so the Mechaber says, the Shulchan Aruch says in Tafresh Peiches at 688 7 Zion, it says Hamafarish Bayom. Fascinating halacha. If somebody's traveling in the water, somebody's going out in a caravan. So somebody's going on a journey. He's preparing to go on a journey. He's going to be traveling. And he can't find the Megillah to take with him on his trip, on his journey. So he's going to be on his journey. He's going to be on his trip during Purim on the 14th day of Adar. So what's the recommendation here? What do we advise him to do? So he says, the best thing to do is to read, instead of reading on the 14th, is to read either on the 11th, 12th, or the 13th, and to read it without a bracha. Which is based on a Mishnah. Mishnah says that those are times that one, in a b'diavad circumstance, a b'diavad situation, one can also read. It's not in the normal circumstances, in the normal conditions, only under emergency situations, circumstances that these dates are also ripe, and these dates are also auspicious for reading the Megillah. It's based on psukim in the Megillah that Esther Amalka mentions it in the Megillah, these dates. As a matter of fact, that based on this, there are those Hasidim and others that do not say Tachnun starting from 11, 12, and 13. They don't say any Tachnun because they believe that these dates are also very, very special dates, and they increase the Simcha. From Rosh Chodesh Adar already, you're supposed to be Mesameach, and then you're supposed to, Bez Hashem, increase it closer and closer to Purim. So starting from 11, it's supposed to be, the Simcha is even supposed to be more pronounced. Because it seems that these dates, because where else do you find? Where else in an entire in the Jew? What? Sorry, what?
They could just cut it out
through Adar. Right. Okay. So in the entire Jewish milestones, Jewish life cycle, Jewish liturgy, whatever you want to refer to it as, where else do you find that there's a flexibility? And where it's plastic, where that if there's a date that's enshrined, there's a date that's enshrined, right? Let's say that says the 15th day of Nisan is Pesach. Where else do you find that you could do something that you could, eat the matzah on the 12th or the 13th day of Nisan? What? If you had a month. Oh, right, okay, right. But that's it, okay. But that has a halach already of being mamish. It's like Paskin and Shemayim that if Bezdin makes a ruling that Asher Tekru Oisam b'Moyadam, right? So it says Asher Tekru Atem b'Moyadam. Where do you find a holiday that has that type of flexibility? If there's a date that is
reconstruction just have that flexibility.
Right, I'm saying it sounds revolutionary. It sounds sounds controversial almost. That there's a date. This date is a date that is part of the original Takana. Right. So we'll see. Very good. All right. So we'll see.
Also, we have different dates for Purim. We have Purim.
Very good. Right. So this, the Purim itself is the only yontif in Jewish calendar and in Jewish history that has two different dates. Right. You have 14th day of Adar for regular cities and villages and towns, and you have the 15th for walled cities. Right. For example, Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, the holy city Yerushalayim in Jerusalem, is a walled city, and they don't celebrate Purim on the 14th day of Adar. For them, it's a regular day almost, So they celebrate Purim on the 15th day of Adar.
Next door, named Brock, they celebrate.
So Yerushalayim always started at first, and then outside the city, because it took place from the time for the messengers to come out.
That's a regular holiday. But when it comes to Purim, there was a special ruling that was instated for walled cities, and it's based. The Mishnah Berurah explains it in Sif. Let's see where it is. Okay, in Tafresh Peiches.
We put a wall around the United States.
No, it's only walls that were enacted from the time of Joshua and Yoshua ben Nun. It has to be a real, from way back, all the way from Yoshua ben Nun.
So new walls don't count.
New walls don't count, no. The question is about Shushan Abira. because Shushan, the city of Shushan, was the province, was the capital of Persia, and that was a walled city. And they were given a second day in order to be able to battle, in order to kill their enemies. So the question is, was that city also walled from the time of Yoshua ben Nun? So let's see how the Mishabur explains it. He says, Kibisman Mordechai, the Eis HaNes, but in the time of Mordechai, in the time of the miracle, the Torah says, the Megillah says, that all the Jews were given the day of the 13th of Adar in order to wage battle. A preemptive strike, a preemptive battle to fence, to make sure that they would get them before anybody gets them, right?
And the army didn't get in their way.
What's that?
The military and the police.
It was a miracle. It was a miracle that
The king let them do it.
the king let them do it. Exactly, yeah.
The police stayed back.
V'nachu b'yom Yudal, and then they rested on the 14th day. So they fought for their lives on the 13th day, because obviously, I mean, the people could still defend themselves. I mean, right? You can't imagine that the enemies, that the Persians could have attempted, and they weren't going to just sit there like lame ducks and like basically like just helpless and hapless. Imagine they could have just tried to attack back. So he says that they rested on the 14th day. For us also Mishnah B'Sukkos, the 14th day was made as a day for parting, the day for celebration, because that was their day of rest. In Shushan, it was given to the Jewish people to also fight on when? On the 14th day. So the day that they rested was the 15th day. Therefore, they deferred the Yontif. They delayed the Yontif until the 15th day of Adar. And since in time of antiquity, way back in the time of Mordechai and Esther, it was divided into 2 days. 2 days of Yontif, the 14th day and 15th day, because the 15th day was specially designated and earmarked just for the Shushan people, for the Shushan Jews. When the Mordechai and Esther enacted the special holiday with the consent and with the support of the Anshe Knesset, the men of the Great Assembly, then Likva Purim Ladoris, in order to make this into a holiday for perpetuity, for eternity, that this holiday will be a holiday that will live on forever. Imagine that they had this was the first holiday that was a non-Doraisa holiday, right? You have Pesach, you have Shavuos, you have Sukkot, all those are written in the Torah. The first holiday that had basically unanimous consent and was universal application that applied everywhere and to everybody was Purim. So you think about it, it was a major type of chidush. It was a very novel ruling, very exceptional, almost like we said, revolutionary. But they were prophets. Anshe Knesset Zagdol was comprised of Nevi'im, Mordechai and Esther. The Gemara says in Megillah Daf Yudalid that there were 48 Nevi'im, there were 48 prophets. Now, there were many, many more prophets throughout the history of the Jewish people. The Gemara says explicitly that there was a preponderance, a whole plethora, myriads and myriads and myriads of thousands of Nevi'im, but only 48, and 48 is a very interesting number, because Mem Ches says, the Mishnah Ovo says, the 48 ways that the Torah is really deduced and that the Torah is understood and the Torah is acquired through. The 48 ways, right? Rabbi Noach Weinberg became very famous, that's all, for popularizing what he called the 48 ways, right? Where he went ahead and he extrapolated based on each of those 48 astounding lessons from each of those 48 ways. But anyhow, 48, all right? So 48 is also the age that Avram Avinu became the Navi, basically. Avram Avinu, according to Machlokes in the Rambam, the Shitas in the Rambam, and Girsos, different versions of the Rambam, was Avram 45 or was it 48 when he started probing and deciphering and really having that a shtickle like clairvoyancy? I don't know, maybe like real nevuah. So Shiloh, did he have real nevuah at that? He seemed to already have nevuah at that time because Baruch told him, Lech Lecha Mi'artzecha. And according to that sheet, if he was 48, he had a revelation from God. He had full prophecy at 48 years old. They say that he was 3 when it started. And anybody who doubts the fact that a 3-year-old could start really having this intellectual odyssey and saga and really thinking about life and figuring things out, should meet some little kids that I've seen. Some kids are very precocious and they can ask you questions. I remember one of my kids at 3 years old was asking me earth-shattering questions. I was scared. On theodicy and on philosophy. The kids can really be very, very smart. I'm sure you've seen kids like that. So, to see that Avram Avinu, 3 years old, it's not far-fetched at all. It's not far-fetched. And then for 45 years, he said, Ma. Ma means what? right? Ma is a scientific quest, right, of Ma. Lama means why. Lama is already a different level. But Ma is, what is this? What is this all about? For 45 years, that's Ma. And then 48 was the Moach. Moach is the culmination of the brain, where he really had that aptitude, where he really had now the faculties of cognition to really go. And then the Rabbi gave him his first tzivoy, according to some opinions, of Lech Lecha. And according to the Ashtrava, the Heilige Rebbe, he said the first tzivoy that any Jew, because according to Rambam, Avram Avinu was the first Jew. The first tzivoy, the commandment that any Jew ever got was to go to Eretz Yisrael. Chavivas, right? Chovev Tzion, right? That Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. That's the first thing that he got. The first commandment that any Jew ever got, right, was to go to Eretz Yisrael. On a metaphorical level and more on a philosophical level, Rishonim explained that Lech Lecha, because God could have said Lech, go. Lech, go. What's Lech Lecha? Lech Lecha means go into yourself. That if you could become the leader, the quintessential leader, the archetypical leader of the world, because Avram Avinu, even non-Jews, Christianity, Islam, whether we like it or not, they all stem, basically, from his children, in a way. Not that he would have condoned or sanctioned it necessarily, but, we talk about, let's say, it's very popular to talk about Judeo-Christian ethics and all these things, right? Which was the blueprint for a lot of society and Western democracy. So you think about it, Avram Avinu was the pioneer, the progenitor. And he was told, if you want to become the leader, Lech Lecha. Leadership starts with leading yourself, with taming yourself, taming your own desires, taming your own temptation, taming your own characteristics and your own character traits. Lech Lecha, go into yourself. Really delve into yourself, discover who you are. And how do you discover who you are? The only way you really discover who you are is Lech Lecha, to go into yourself, is to divest yourself from Artzecha, Moladecha, Beisavicha. You really have to work on divesting yourself. From Artzecha means basically the cultural influences, because we're all products of our society, we're all products of our culture, whether you like it or not. Even if you don't watch television, if you listen to radio, right? These marketing agencies, they pour in millions and billions of dollars into programming your brain to want to buy Nike sneakers or to want to buy a certain, any product. Right? They go ahead and they analyze human psychology, and they say, we're going to figure out a way to make it tempting and to seduce this person almost into, to make it alluring and enticing for the person to want to buy this item. So therefore, it's all brainwashed. So how do you know what is your decision? How do you know it's your decision? How do you know it's you talking? How do you know it's your heart, your conscience talking? The answer is, Lech Lecha me'artzecha. You got to leave the Artzecha. It's not easy. And Meladatcha, from where you come from your parents. Sometimes your parents don't teach you the right things. You have to know, you have to figure out. You have to say, my parents teach me the right things. All right? Meladatcha is also, but Meladatcha is more than your parents. That's more than the what we call nurture, how you were raised. That's Beisavicha. Beisavicha is the nurture you were raised in, right? How your parents really brought you up. May not be the right way. Meladatcha is your genes. Right? You have genetic propensities, you have genetic predispositions. Leave it all behind. You want to know who you are? That's a Jew. The Jew, more than anything, means that you're an independent thinker. Is you're able to think for yourself, and you're able to really, really understand that there is an element of where I have to figure out who I am in life, what I am, make decisions that are really true. And what's ultimate truth? Obviously, the ultimate truth is the Torah Kedosha. Is that the Holy Torah. Holy Torah is written by Hashem. There's no, when it comes to me, because it comes from Hashem, it's not subject to anybody's whims, to anybody's, vicissitudes. It's subject only to the Rebbe Shalom himself, to ultimate infinity. So anyhow, 48. How do we get to 48? What was Shaykhus? What was the connection? Oh, because 48 prophets, right. So there are 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses. So 7 women prophets, right? Now, who are the 7 women prophets? One of them was Esther. Esther Malka was the 7 women prophets. So she was, they needed still the stamp and the imprimatur, they needed of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, but once they approved it, they made a Purim, they made a holiday that was mamash, it wasn't Doraisa, it wasn't written in the Torah. So the Chilku Gam Kein Osel Shniyam V'Haroi L'Sakin Shekol Yeshua Mikav Schoma K'Moshe Shun Yiyadom L'Shushan Lasses B'Tavsavav, and that therefore it was appropriate to establish that any city that was also surrounded like Shushan, would also be like Shushan and have a day on the Tesvav. But because the miracle happened in Shushan, therefore they ascribed the importance to Shushan. They attributed the honor to Shushan. And they said that a city that's like Shushan, and it had to be a city that was also surrounded, a walled city that was surrounded from the time of Achashverosh, should read on Tesvav. But since that would have been the theory, it's very, very fascinating here. Really, the theory is that really you should ascribe all importance to Shushan, because that's where the miracle happened, and that's where it was originally enacted, that the walled city was on the 15th. But since Yerushalayim wasn't laying in ruins and was in destruction, so it's considered to be disparaging then to Yerushalayim. So and therefore the cities outside of Eretz Yisrael would be more paramount and would supersede the city of Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim. Therefore, and therefore, imagine this, in order to show reverence, in order to show priority and precedence to Eretz Yisrael, therefore, instead of making the law is that we follow Shushan and follow the date of Achashverosh, we go way back according to Yoshua ben Nun, according to the city of Yerushalayim, just in order to show reverence, in order to pay homage to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Yisrael. It's so important. You think about that element, that idea. We're living in Chutz La'aretz, and we really, so many of us, we love it here. We're so entrenched over here. It's so ingrained in our psyche that we're Americans. And we are, Baruch Hashem, Americans. We're proud to be Americans. 1 second. Eretz Yisrael is our real, Eretz Yisrael. We have to express, every day we have to express our fervent love for Eretz Yisrael. Imagine that the whole Megillah, Tezvav, so many halachas were changed just based on covered Eretz Yisrael. Amazing thing. It had nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael. Mashmi to Eitzel Sinai. What shaykhs, what connection to Eretz Yisrael? No connection in the least, but just in order to pay homage to Eretz Yisrael, to show that fidelity to our holy Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, the halacha was changed, basically. Imagine that. Altered. Mamash altered just in order to show. And that's why it says, Urei B'tuv. Now, even if things are going on in Eretz Yisrael that are not so appropriate, especially Yerushalayim, Urei B'tuv Yerushalayim. Always have that positive eye. Always have to look positively at Eretz Yisrael. So he says like this. He says, Av b'she'enu mukavs b'moish Yishuv b'nun. He says, Vashar, every other city, you read on the 14th, Levad Shushan. Shushan is the only exception. That even though Shushan was not walled when it came to now, how he knows this is very interesting. How does he know that Shushan wasn't a walled city? Again, I guess they had historical records. They had to have historical, archaeological records. Because how else would you know that in the time of Yeshua ben Nun, Shushan, because Persia was always a major, major player in the world scene. I mean, Persia was one of the greatest empires. And Persia, conquered when Koresh was the king of Persia. They conquered Asia Minor, a bulk of the civilized world back then. So to say that he says that it wasn't Mukavs Rishon Shil Benun. Even so, it's the only exception. The only city that you would read on the 15th that wasn't surrounded for the time of Yoshua ben Nun is Shushan, because that's where the miracle happened. Very interesting trivia question to ask him, right? The only city. Shushan was included, right? Because that's where the takana was made. That's where the takana was made. So that's why it's the exception. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. It's interesting because we go according to Yerushalayim, and Yerushalayim is the most famous place in the world today. I mean, you don't see anywhere else, where else? China, with the Great Wall of China. How old is the Great Wall of China, right? There are not too many places where they celebrate on the 15th. And yet, it's not called Yerushalayim Purim or Purim Yerushalayim. It's called Shushan Purim. So he says that, because that's where the miracle transpired. That's where the miracle happened. Okay, so now, back to our discussion.
Shushan still exists.
What's that? So there are opinions that say that that we know where Shushan is, and there are even there are those that say that they know that Mordechai and Esther are buried there. Others dispute that and say that Mordechai is in Eretz Yisrael. So what?
I think you can give money and they'll say your names by the cover of Mordechai and Esther.
Amazing, right? Amazing. You know how many? It was thousands of years ago. It's amazing. So, How many people have such a heritage? How many people have such a rich, history? It's utterly amazing. But it's also to say that that Achashverosh allowed Esther to be married with Mordechai. It's very, very strange.
Yeah.
Because she stayed there. She stayed there to the very end. What? What?
He outlived the
Sorry.
There's an opinion that Esther was a Gilgul.
Yeah, but still. Right, but how would the Persian government allow that? The Persian kingdom, how would they? You think that it was obscured until much later? They didn't say who it was. I mean, they had a child together. Daryavish was their child. I mean, okay. Some say that it wasn't. She was never with him officially. She was never confined with him intimately at all. It was it was a shade. What?
Do people know where Achashverosh is buried?
That I'm not sure. I don't know. But she had. I mean, Esther's life was like none other. Because also she went back to Mordechai clandestinely. She went back to Mordechai, and the Tosfos and all the Rishonim ask, how was she allowed to be with him after she was with Achashverosh? How that worked. But I mean, no one's life in Tanakh probably parallels life of Esther Malka. And she had a life of concealment. The Kishma Kain He. And it wasn't originally her name. Her original name was Hadassah. But Kishma, she had a really, really. I mean, you think about it. It's really sad. That she saved the Jewish people. But you can imagine her personal life. She was a real heroine, tremendous. Tzaddikus. Utterly amazing. You read the story. There were those tzaddikim that cried. I think I once told you. I never forget that. I once heard the Klosenberger Zatzal, who I always idolized because an uncle of mine was his shliach tzibur. It was his private chazan, and so I always held, but the Klosenberger, was Rabbi Kusiel Halberstam. He was a big, tremendous Rebbe. He was also a big posek. He wrote many tshuvas for him. But Rachmal Tzlan, tragically, he lost 11 children and his wife in the Holocaust. His wife and all 11 children were killed out. And yet he was a father, to the orphans in the Holocaust. And he rebuilt, amazing, what he accomplished, amazing. And he was never, never felt forlorn or despondent. I mean, I'm sure in his, but he just motivated people, and he just inspired people, and he built people despite all his suffering and tragedy. So I once heard a tape. This is when they had the cassettes, right? So I remember putting the cassette, and he's reading the Megillah, and I wanted to hear him reading the Megillah because he's so holy, so holy. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the Megillah, he starts saying, "Mama, mama, mama." Mama, mama, and he starts crying and crying and crying. And he kept on doing it. And I was thinking, it's a hefsek. Why is he saying mama? What's that about? And he's crying and crying. So the crying, I finally understood. I said, it's a really sad, poignant story. It's such depth to it, and so much drama and human emotion, It's really, we take it for granted. Read the story, all psyched up, all merry. It's really, it's traumatic, she was basically kidnapped, against her will, and she has to save her people. It's all on this young girl. According to some opinions, she was older. It's machlokes in the medrash how old she was. Some she was very old at that time, whatever. But Pashim Shah, she was a young maiden, and he starts crying, "Mama, mama, mama," and I finally realized, what is mama? He's not talking about his mother. Mama means, it's a Rosh Hashanah, it's an acronym for Melech Malchei Amlachim. Melech Malchim, the king of all kings. Melech Malchim Malchim, the king of all kings. And he was so touched and so moved by it while he was reading it. And he's thinking about the genocide. He's thinking about probably the Nazis. He's thinking about his own wife and children and his whole entire community that were eradicated. You imagine the emotions, a torrent of emotions, that here you had a whole civilization of Jewish people that were spared. And yet, in the 20th century, right, when people were supposed to be at the pinnacle, the height of civilization, the height of sophistication, they weren't spared. One out of every 3 Jews was barbarically murdered. And so, the mama was Melech Malcham Lachem, like he was crying to the Eibusher, he was crying to the Bashefer, to the God. And it's just begging and pleading, save us Jewish people, why'd that happen maybe? Or, so, but Hefsek, I guess I'm a survivor, especially of his caliber, of his sitkus and kedusha and holiness. You don't ask questions, you can't ask questions, So, that was the Klosenberger, yeah. anyhow, so now let's go back to halacha. So we said there's 2 days. It's only Yontif we have 2 days, 2 alternating days, right? Only Yontif. We'll speak about that, what the Rishonim say about that. Very, very fascinating insights. And also the only Yontif that technically may start a few days in advance. That doesn't start exactly on the 14th, but there may be room, a leeway, a flexibility to begin on the 11th, the 12th, the 13th. Huh? This is just Megillah, yeah. Right. So the Mishnah Berurah says, he says that, so if a person's going on a journey, a person's leaving on a trip, and he knows that he's not going to be able to have a Megillah with him, and he's going to miss a whole Megillah, then before he leaves on the trip, he should preempt it and read it at an earlier date. That's what he says. So he says, listen to what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says he should make sure to gather 10 people together. We'll see a huge tumult, Aruch HaShulchan and Mishnah Berurah on this, okay? But we'll see, according to Mishnah Berurah, you gather 10 people together. If you're reading at an earlier date, you're reading on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, not the 14th of Adar, you're reading at an earlier date, you should gather together a minyan together. Again, like, where else do you find that? Imagine if you're doing something, so you do it, b'chashoy, you do it really, surreptitiously, like as secret as possible, because I'm not really doing the real mitzvah, so I do it very covert, No, you should have a minyan, you should do it as a minyan. So Shlo B'zman, sorry, he says, because Shlo B'zman needs 10. He says that, Achein. What? So means you're talking about, but the Meiri holds that even but you have Yotze even b'Yachid, b'Yachidus, because pursuing Nisa. They couldn't read on their own. Yeah. No, because they couldn't read on their own. They didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to do it, right? There's a whole halacha that says that the Kfarim, the villagers, they were ignoramuses. It's funny that you'd have illiterate Jews, but I guess there was a tkufa, there was an era that they had the Jews that were mamish, that were illiterate. So it wasn't common though amongst the grand scheme of Jewish history. Most the Jews were always the most literate people on the planet. And the most educated, because the Torah says, you have a chiyuv, you have a moral imperative, the obligation. You have to teach your children. We're the only society that has that. You have to teach your children. You have to make sure they're educated, right? So Lamaisa though, there was a time we had for villagers, and that they didn't know how to read. They weren't so therefore when they went to the Yom HaKnisa, they went to the marketplaces. It was a different date. They had the city people that read for them. Okay, so he says like this, that Efshar Desagi B'Tanim, but it could be that when you're reading, this is a different halacha though. This is not the villagers' halacha. That's a different halacha. He says that it says. But we read it at a different date. We read it. We have them go in the marketplace and make it more convenient for them to be able to read on a date that's convenient for them, because others they won't read the Megillah. But this is a different halacha. This halacha is that you're a regular person, you're not a villager, and you're going on a journey, you're going on a trip. You're not going to have a Megillah with you. So we say that you should go ahead and read it at an earlier date, but it can't be before the 11th. It has to be from the 11th onward. Okay. So he says that you should have 10. And he says, but maybe.
Purim is on the 15th, so you can
14th.
On the 14th, so you
Right.
can do it 11, 12, 13.
You could do it, technically speaking.
You can't do it the day after?
You mean on the 15th?
Yeah.
So 16th, no. Because the pasuk says lo yavor, not you're not allowed to postpone it. You're not allowed to delay it any more than
And
that.
if you do it early, that means then you'll have the Sudas mitzvahs of Purim. You can have it 3 days in a row.
The what? No. So this halacha is only for the Mikra Megillah. Let's see. Yeah, it's only for Mikra
You
Megillah.
can't turn it into like a Pesach, like a 7-day holiday.
No.
Or 3-day.
No. Interesting you say that, because technically, if there are
It's have a Suda, no?
right.
Purim 1 or 2.
Right. There's one. Some say at nighttime also you're supposed to eat something, but there's no mitzvah to have. Technically, the mitzvah is only during the daytime to have a full seudah. But those that say that also at night you should do something also because it is a yontif, so therefore at night also.
Wash and bench and eat something small.
Yeah.
Right. But if you read the Megillah a day early, you can't do the Suda also a day early, or
I don't think so.
have
No.
it 2 days in a row.
No. Right. So it's a machlokes whether children could be mistarif in this counter number 10. So Mishnah Berurah says that it could be that they do. The Purim says absolutely not. He's already find that children could be part of a minyan. He says children can't be part of a minyan. So even though this is not the real valid and it doesn't have the real chashivas, the real status of a real reading, but still children would not be good according to Pri Megadim. But the Mishnah Berurah says that maybe they'd be okay. He says, since it's just to publicize the miracle, it's not the real date, but you still want to publicize the miracle because for this person, it's his observance, it's his commemoration of the holiday. So you want to pursue Nisos. He says that maybe children would count for that. He says, he says that Ran speaks about those villagers that we said that can read it at an earlier date when they go to the big city, right? They go to city slickers, right? So do they have to read twice or they only have to read once? Because there is there's a halacha that we read twice. The Nevi'im instituted, according to most opinions, the Nevi'im instituted the daytime reading, and the Rabbanim were the ones that came along and said a nighttime reading also, they darshan psukim. But the real reading is the daytime reading, and then we spoke about the fact that let's say if you could have to choose one reading. So those that say that then even though the night reading is only the Rabbanon, it would still take precedence over the day reading, which is a Takanos Nevi'im, because you're not supposed to pass up a mitzvah. Others say that, one second, if you have to evaluate, you have to be mashar, you have to really go ahead and analyze, well, which one is more important? And if the daytime reading actually indeed is more important, then it would eclipse the nighttime reading, even though you'd be passing up the mitzvah because you're passing it up for a more mahudr, for a more enhanced observance of it. Okay? All right, so unfortunately I have to conclude over here. But Be'ez Hashem,